My name is Satish Sharma and I'll be talking about Hinduism. The Hindu way of life is a way of life, a way of living according to an understanding which has been refined and tested and gathered over at least 5,000 years. In that time, our wise people, religious people, spiritual practitioners have done practices, have lived lives, and gathered together all the lessons that they themselves found which served them in that time. So we have a vast number of books which record all the individual experiences of these saints, sages, and spiritual leaders. The principles that all of these leaders came to understand, those have been distilled, and those are probably what would be as close to having commandments or rules. They're the principles by which Hindus have found that if they adhere to them, that they practice them, that they experiment with them, then they have prosperous, happy and healthy lives as individual beings, but also as families and as societies. We have a word which is Brahman, and that is the ultimate source of all of creation and energy in life. So that's the place or the energy from which all of life emerges, and it's omnipotent, i.e. it's all-powerful, it's ever-present, it's everywhere, and the appropriate name for that energy, that divinity, would be Brahman. Hindus do gather in a place of worship, but when I was being brought up, my parents taught me that there are only two temples in this world. One is the body, and one is the whole of the earth. Taking it to a very much more social and common arrangement, there are temples in which the practices of Hindus are enshrined, and so Hindus do congregate in temples to reconnect with their own spiritual practices. Hindus pray most of the time if they're genuinely practitioners. There are spiritual practitioners who will probably be praying most of their waking time, even though they may be doing other things. From the Hindu perspective, prayer is an act of introspection, that you turn your attention inwards, and whatever it is you're doing it with that inward attention. So when you think of somebody praying conventionally, they'll be sitting in a posture quietly, eyes closed, and their attention is introverted. The majority of Hindus will pray at least once a day. Some will be following disciplines and practices where they'll pray 5 times a day, and that's been part of the tradition for many millennia. And those who are practicing at more determined, perhaps more concentrated, more focused levels. In Hinduism, one of the most common identifying markers, I suppose, would be the presence of a little spot in between the eyebrows and slightly above the center of the eyebrows. It's called a bindi, and it's worn both by men and by women. It has, over the recent years, acquired a fashion status, and it can be quite decorative, but in the past it was used to help your attention revert to that particular point of your body again and again and again. Having a little spot there, a bindi, it brings your attention to that place. The ancient sages, they worked out that if a person always has a bindi at that location, then you're continuously reminded of that location. So it's very, very much a spiritual practice, an ongoing spiritual practice all the time, as well as a decorative and quite fashionable icon as well. There is one item of jewellery which Hindu women wear, and it's given to them and they receive it at the time of marriage, and it's called a Mangal Sutra, and it's possibly the most sentimentally important piece of jewellery that a Hindu woman would wear. It carries all of the sentiments and the blessings that are given to her at the time of marriage, both by her new family, her husband's family, and also the family that she has grown up in. And so it is something of enormous sentimental value. It is identifiable, it has black beads and also gold beads, but it's more than just a conventional ornamental piece of jewellery. One of the traditions which I think possibly most people are aware of is that Hindu marriages in the past have been arranged. That tradition has, I think, possibly a higher profile in the awareness of non-Hindus than in the awareness of Hindus. The scriptures recognize all of the forms of union between a man and a woman. And so there are marriages in the past, in our mythology, in our history, amongst our royals and amongst our sages also, which are not arranged, but which are purely based on the feelings and the sentiments of the two people involved. In the current climate, in our current civilization and cultural background here, I think the ideal is when two families who are of similar background and of similar values, when their children come together and the children find commonality, similarity, feelings and sentiments for each other, and then in the background the aunties and the uncles will get together and arrange it. And so there is an element of arrangement still which is present, but it's never forced amongst Hindus. It should never be forced. It's not the primacy is not to inflict a relationship on youngsters which those youngsters are not party to and not fully committed to. That's a recipe for disaster in any culture, and Hindus have long recognized that. But I would suggest that the parents and the wider family on both sides, on brides and grooms, they're perhaps very, very active to try and encourage situations to occur where like-minded individuals could meet. So, oh yes, it's one of the best pastimes that the elders in families engage in. What is called Hinduism, the beliefs and practices, they originate in India, and in times gone past the majority of the country was a very agricultural country. And so the diets that grew up and developed over a period of time, they were diets which allowed a person to exist very comfortably and healthily in a predominantly agricultural country. The chances are that the home would probably be a vegetarian home. The majority of Hindus are vegetarian, and so there would be a sensitivity to perhaps not take the vibrations or the smells or anything to do with non-vegetarian food substances into the home itself. And so Hindus who are wanting to move forward with their spiritual practices, they will not drink alcohol, and many of them will not even drink coffee because of the caffeine, tea because of the caffeine, etc. So a typical Hindu home, you would enter it, and it is cleanliness is an important part of the Hindu way of life. And so typically Hindus, when they enter their own home, they would take their shoes off. Sometimes because of the substance that the shoes are made of, leather is unclean, and other times just purely and solely as a hygienic aspect. They would remove their shoes, leave the dust and the dirt of the outside world outside of where they live, and then settle into the home. In the practice of their religious rituals, their rites and their meditations, Hindus have in their homes a shrine, and the idea of divinity is that there is only one ultimate divinity, there is only one God, but that God is ever present in all things. And so when you worship or pray, you can choose the form which resonates with you emotionally the most. In a shrine there will possibly be some sort of a statue or a photograph or a picture, a painting, but the image which elicits the appropriate emotional response from you will be what you have in your shrine. There may be incense sticks, there may be water which is purified and used as part of the processes, there may be flowers, there may be fruits. The shrine will, with most homes, it will be a place where people go and pray and connect with the idea of abundance, of happiness and prosperity, and so there may be symbols of each of those within there. With regard to the Hindu husband and wife relationship, and bearing in mind we're talking about attending a Hindu home, it's worth understanding a little bit about the dynamic that exists. Hinduism and the faith and the understanding, the philosophy teaches that each person can connect with divinity by fulfilling the roles that fit where they're born, what sort of family they're born into, whether they're male, whether they're female. So in a Hindu home, I would suggest that the conventional understanding is that the responsibility has always been with the father or the parent, the male, to make a house, and the woman can make it into a home. Men are appalling, and I'm sure this is not just to do with Hinduism, this is across the board. We're appalling at making homes. We can make houses, but to our approach is that to introduce beauty, warmth, love, affection into that is actually something that the woman of the family is so much better capable and better equipped to do. So when it comes to interacting with a person who is not so much concerned as a police officer would be with the internal happiness, the harmony of the home, but possibly something external, there may be a reluctance, and perhaps the better approach would be to interact with the husband of the family. So when a police officer is attending a Hindu home, firstly, just as a general response, and perhaps to initiate an inquiry or in response to a call to the residents, I would suggest that the most important thing to bear in mind would be to take the shoes off and just genuinely be courteous and respectful. It's possibly also worth bearing in mind that if a Hindu woman is on her own, then the vast majority would not really want to be in an interview or engaging with a complete stranger in the home. That's something to bear in mind. If the intention of the visit wasn't informal, wasn't investigative, it was to conduct an arrest or something along those lines, then I don't think there would be a difficulty in keeping shoes on, etc. The respect for the law and the fact that the officers are there to conduct a particular aspect of their role as officers of the law, that would probably prevail over the desire for genuine cleanliness. If there is sufficient evidence that's been presented to warrant the issue of an arrest warrant, then I think that evidence would override the desire just to have a clean house. You would certainly be able to go in with confidence and do what was necessary. When Hindus meet other Hindus who they don't know, or when Hindus meet other people they don't know, there is a natural reservation, a reserved approach to relating to a new person. In terms of shaking hands, that's more to do with the individual Hindu themselves. There are people who will quite happily in this day and age shake hands very comfortably, but it's not forbidden. It's not an edict in any way, shape or form. It is a question of how comfortable that person is with the situation and with the person who they're dealing with. So a safe way of introducing yourself and interacting would be to just join hands and say namaste, or even hello. That would be perfectly acceptable. When a Hindu passes away, traditionally Hindus will be cremated. We have, as an understanding, we encourage people not to be too attached to their physical forms, to their bodies. Our perspective is that within each and every one of us there is a divine soul, and that divine soul occupies a body to experience the life as a human being and to learn lessons. And so from the traditional Hindu perspective, when a person passes away, the soul continues its journey and the body is left behind. The body is revered as being also a divine creation, but the intention is, as soon as death has occurred, is to return it to its basic elements, to send air back into air, to send water back into water, to release fire to fire, dust to dust, etc., so that the composition of the body can be recycled, it can be released back into the earth, and then continue its journey in forming other bodies. There is an understanding also that until a body has completely decomposed, the soul that left it has some degree of attachment to it and would be hindered in its onward journey. When it comes to interacting with a family which is in mourning, there are rituals and processes that we go through, but the overriding approach would be one of courtesy and one of respect, as you would adopt for any person or any family when mourning was the stage they were going through. Beyond that, we have a period of mourning which runs for possibly up to 2 weeks. I think 13 days, 11 days. These are days at which there are benchmarks and there are rituals and services which are performed in this time period. After a person has deceased, we have a tradition whereby a particular scripture is read from the start to the end of the whole scripture itself, and it's read every day, and that helps the families come to terms with the loss and to understand the transition from a life to what happens after a life has ended.